You're listening to Gender, a Wider Lens.
I'm Stella O'Malley, a psychotherapist in Ireland.
And I'm Sasha Ayad, an adolescent therapist in the United States. Since 2016, my practice has been exclusively dedicated to gender-questioning teens and families impacted by gender dysphoria.
I also work with gender-questioning teenagers, and I facilitated support meetings for families and individuals who've been impacted by gender issues.
We're curious about the concept of gender and how it's unfolding in the wider culture.
Join us as we look at gender through a wider lens.
Richie Heron, also known as Tulip R on Twitter, is a 35-year-old detransitioning male who spent almost a decade living as a trans woman. Prior to his fixation on gender, Richie had spent most of his life struggling with debilitating anxiety and obsessional thoughts. As you'll hear, he's brilliant, articulate, and very compelling. But in his teens and young adult life, he forced his big personality into submission. He was terrified of the truth, that he was gay. Internalized shame, body hatred, and extreme isolation only fed into his OCD. In the throes of all this, he found an online forum about gender dysphoria, and everything changed in an instant as Richie developed a new goal and a new OCD obsession. In this interview, he delivers a moving and powerful account of what happened next. And keep in mind, this is the story of a vulnerable adult, well over 18, but still the victim of a system that missed the red flags over and over again. In 2018, after much coaxing from the professionals, he underwent a procedure under the UK's National Health Service which removed his genitals. The regret set in almost immediately. Richie is now working towards suing the NHS for failing to address the serious mental health issues during the diagnostic process. He's active on Twitter and on his brilliant Substack, promoting and reposting stories of detransitioners, particularly highlighting the hidden stories of men, bringing awareness to the public about what he calls the medical scandal of our time. Here's our conversation with Richie. Hi, Stella. I am so excited for you to introduce our guest today.
Yeah, we have the one and only Richie Heron. Is that right? Heron is your surname, Richie?
That is right, Stella, and thank you very much for having me.
We're delighted to have you. You came, I suppose, in like a rocket into this discourse a few months ago, and I think you made everybody sit up. And you made everybody listen because suddenly it was the voice of the male detransitioner, and you didn't pull any punches with it. You went for it, and you said very straight, "This is a very serious position to be in," and you gave everything that you could. So thank you for being so brave. Thank you for speaking up for the male detransitioner because I think they've been lost a lot in this discussion, and I think you've in a way become a leader for male detransitioners, and I'm glad you have.
Thank you very much, Stella. That's very, very kind. I didn't intend for that to happen, but things just happen, I suppose. I really don't know where to start. I think what I was saying is because I've came from the other side completely, and that's what people really need to understand. You may have never have heard of anyone like me because I wasn't on social media. I wasn't screaming and shouting. I was like living my life, as it were, and I was just trying to get on. And then I found after I had surgery, I kind of woke up from what I would call this. I'm speaking for me and me only, but I was definitely in like a hyper fixated obsession where I just had to transition. There was all these sort of different goals and points that I could reach to that I was desperate to hit them. And when it came to the surgery and stuff, that's where I was like I wasn't really for it. And this is where it gets very complicated because I'm trying to like cram all these years with therapy and everything else and my experiences with the gender clinic, my experiences online. People don't understand how powerful these factors are in making you do these things, which are like, when you sit back and think, quite insane. Sorry, Sal, I can see your.
Could you come at the beginning then? Could you tell us, like, just at the beginning, where it all came from? You know what I mean?
Oh.
Yeah, your childhood, like before transitioning, or what brought you to transition?
I was an extremely anxious kid, hyper anxious, a little bit of a hypochondriac as well. The youngest of three, from a working class background, brought up in the northeast of England, which isn't the bastion of culture and diversity, I'm afraid. So growing up as someone who was gay, and I realised that early on, but I did not accept it, and that's a difference. Like, you may know you're gay from a young age, but you do accepting that as a different matter completely. Really struggled with that. I struggled out for various reasons. A large part was the embedded cultural homophobia, the messages I was getting from everywhere, basically, and I became extremely anxious about it. Now, because of my nature, and I've never been tested for autism, I am waiting a test, but I think that is an overlapping factor where I tend to internalize a lot of stuff, and I kind of internalized a lot of this anxiety, and also there was a lot of like trauma in my own life and online from a young age too. And when I say trauma, people think it's got to be like this horrific incident that's extremely violent, and it's not about that. It can be anything that left a mark. And for me, I think from a young age, it was the first time I ever got caught wearing, like, me. I cringe saying it now, even now I carry the shame, but I was desperate to be a ballerina when I was 7. So my sister, who had long quit ballet because she's 5 years older, I took her old ballet tutu and was wearing it in secret and dancing around like the gay kid I was just exploring me, like, well, I was, you know. This was before I had any sense of sexuality on like that, and that's what really kind of annoys me, because you hear in this pipeline that all the males were like started by like doing something seedy in the sister's clothes or something like that, and I was like, for fuck's sake, I was like 7 or 8 years old. That wasn't on my mind at all. What it was the desire to want to express myself. That didn't mean I was a girl. That just meant that I found that was something that I wanted to do. I wanted to be, I suppose I wanted to do something prettier than all the dirty activities that boys were left with, you know? And I really, really was, I think from a very young age, I was bursting. I was a bursting queen that was desperate to come out and sing and dance, but I held that shit in. There were some points where it just completely, like, it would overtake completely, you know? But that developed a lot of anxiety from a young age. That developed in OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder, which came in the form of ruminations and checking ritualistic behaviors. And by that, I mean, like, you do a certain routine and it doesn't make any sense. It could be like, you've got to touch a certain part of the door as you leave the room, and if you don't, your whole families are going to die, and it means you're gay. And that's the sort of thing I was dealing with. And then that evolved into compulsive praying. So I was praying essentially not to be gay and all that sort of thing. There was a little bit of, I say a little bit, I can't remember it clearly, but I think it was a very harsh environment growing up, in the sense that my mum and dad's relationship was a bit rocky. My dad was a minor. There is a stereotype of that, and unfortunately that stereotype was a little bit true. So that had a profound impact on me in school. I was a right little shit till about 11 or 12, and then I just wasn't. All of a sudden, I was always a short kid. Even 10 or 11, amongst my peers, I was short. But I just didn't grow, and everyone else did from 12, 13. My puberty started about 15, 16, and I don't have any like sexual development issues. I was just a late bloomer. I was just a late bloomer. And I was always known as being fiercely intelligent, but also fiercely naive. Like, you could tell me something, I would believe it. And it didn't, and it always confused people as well, because it didn't match with me. Like, I could just pull out something out of my brain, like I just memorized, and everyone would be like, how the hell did you know that? And I'm like, I don't know, I just do. But on a similar sense, I could get drawn into something, I could believe something, and I could believe anyone if they were convincing enough on whatever it was. And that led me to some scenarios online when I was younger, where I would give myself pictures of myself and share information with much older men. And that was a difficult period. And that's one that I'm reluctant to talk too much about. And by the time I was in my early 20s, I had catastrophic mental health. All this OCD wasn't being treated. So I started on SSRIs about 23, 24. And I went to a psychologist when I was in 2013, because I became obsessed with the idea something terrible must have happened when I was younger for us to be the way I was. And a lot of terrible things did happen, but in my mind, it wasn't them. It was something secretive, and it was just another way of delaying the blow of like really just processing all my own crap that I went through. And also missed out that high school was absolutely horrible. I lost my hearing due to a horrible infection when I was 14. My ear was essentially rotten from the inside. So I'm short, fat, with a stinky ear. My parents are going through divorce.
Oh,
I'm getting groomed online. I was having a shit time. It was
sounds
shit.
like it. Can I ask you, I know you said your parents perhaps were distracted with their own marital difficulties, but like while you were going through all this and having this like debilitating OCD and the checking and the scrupulosity, were your parents aware that you were in such distress? Did anyone know?
No.
Wow.
Did you know they didn't know? Were you completely on your own? And would they have been very surprised to hear that you were in distress?
I don't think they would have been surprised, but so my dad worked away from when I was like 12, 13, and then eventually they started splitting when I was about 15. My brother joined and served in the army when I was about, because he's 2.5 years older, so he went straight in like 16, right? And then he went off into Iraq and stuff. And my sister's 5 years older, and she went to university in a different city and never came back. So my mother was just basically trying to deal with everything, and I think it wasn't that she wasn't attentive. She had a lot of other stuff going on as well, and I was aware of it as well. And I became guarded.
In one of your pieces, you said something like, I mistakenly thought, like my parents, that if I was in the safety of my bedroom, nothing bad could happen to me. So, like, there's that piece too. Like, well, my kid's not running around in the streets. He's just upstairs. What could go wrong? So that's important too.
And a lot of people don't understand that I used the internet from a very young age as this was new. No one knew what it was capable of. You've got to keep in mind that stranger danger, which was a huge thing in the 80s up here, was all about people getting snatched from cars and playgrounds and whatever. They were aware that you could meet some dodgy people online, but you'd have to go and meet them, right? Nothing bad can possibly happen. And because I was always indoors, because the bullying was really shit, because my brother was no longer there, and he had a reputation for sticking up for us, when I was younger. And all of a sudden, that was just it was all gone. And I had a horrible, horrible time, 14, 17. I really didn't enjoy life at all.
And can you just remind our audience, how old are you now, and what year was it when you were a teenager, approximately?
I would have been a teenager from, let's see, 2001 till 2011, I
And you're
suppose.
35 now?
Yes, I
Okay,
am.
okay.
I'm
Keep going.
35.
Just that context is helpful.
Yeah.
So
No, that's
so your parents are getting a divorce. You're going through all this stuff on your own, and by the time you were in your 20s, pick it up from there.
I'm not doing well at all. I'm still. I had a job. I've had a job. I've been in work since I've been 17. So I was holding down my job, and it was the routine that was keeping us going. But I wasn't happy. I was massively overweight. By the time I was 22, I was about 147 kilograms, which is just over 23 stone thereabouts. I was really large, and I hated myself, hated my body. Didn't go outside, and I'm online 24/7, just playing games. And I would literally go to work, turn on the computer, play games, go to work, and that was my life. There was no, and occasionally the odd times that I would go out, which was rare, and my friends were always. It wasn't like they weren't asking us; they just kind of stopped because I wouldn't go. And I just kind of isolated myself completely. And by about 24, actually started trying to going down the route for help from about 21. Just doing little things like seeing like counselors here or there just for general anxiety. But I wasn't like in a good place to process. And anyway, approached me doctor, I think it was about 2012, 2013, and told him I'd been having panic attacks since I was 4 years old and stuff like that. And that's like in my medical history so that they could confirm it. And I was like, I'm dealing with this intense anxiety. I'm dealing with these symptoms of OCD, the check-in, the ruminations, the intrusive thoughts. And I just literally couldn't. I was like, I can't go on like this. If this goes on any longer, I'm going to top myself because this is just, I'm not dealing with this going on. And I just couldn't. So, and I also became obsessed that the reason this was because of the secret thing that had happened when I was younger. No one possibly knew, and not even I knew, and I had to like piece all the bits together. I wasn't well, and I was lost in conspiracy theories too.
Okay, so you believed that like you had basically repressed a traumatic memory, like some poignant
Yeah.
specific event that you had repressed. Where did you get that
Yes.
idea? Where did that come from? Or was that maybe an expression of the OCD traits you were having at the time? You said conspiracies too, so.
Yeah. It was a mix of everything. It was a mix of the OCD. It was a mix of like and because I was into conspiracy theories, I came across some crazy theories about why people were gay. Like gay was all because of trauma and stuff like that. And so I went down the route thinking that there was like this hidden thing that potentially happened, and that in itself is an OCD rumination, right?
I know.
So people don't understand like that is the perfect OCD rumination. If something must have happened, I can't remember it. So it's like you believe that's so real that you tried to. So I saw the psychologist.
And that was just like in the 90s, there'd been that repressed memory kind of thing. So you kind of, that would have been in the background, I presume, from media that, you
Yes.
can have this repressed memory and these things.
Yeah.
I often think people, as a therapist, people often come to me and they want me to find the thing that made them mad. What is it? Was it my dad, or is it? And it's like it's probably 14 different things.
Exactly, and it's all staring you right in the face. You just don't want to say it. You're like, I don't care about all those other issues that I'm aware of. It's these things that I can't possibly know. Because
did people know, just before you go on, did people know you were gay at this stage? Like you're in your 20s now and you're overweight and you're playing your games.
My brother, like everyone online used to like joke about the things I would say, like they all kind of knew, but I was refusing to accept it, so they would kind of taunt us about it. My mother knew from a very, very early age. She was like, I kind of knew when you were like 3 or 4, to be honest. You're like, because she was a childminder as well, and it was like, you're just different. You're really soft. You didn't like getting your hands dirty. You wanted to play dress up. You wanted a pop up kitchen. You were just like a complete, like, you're a little bit of a stereotype, but and she would say this when I lived with her when I was in my early 20s. Very early 20s, she was like, you can love anyone you like, it doesn't bother me, and I just want you to be happy. And I was too depressed and autistic to understand what the hell she meant. What she was saying is, I'm pretty sure you're gay, and it's okay if you are. It doesn't bother me at all, sort of thing. And I even think, as hard, stern-faced as my dad was, I think he kind of knew it from an early age too. And my brother certainly did. He used to here's the story. When I came out as trans to my brother, and I said, I went to see him, and I said, I got something to tell you. He smirked, and he went, "You're gay, aren't you?" And I went, "No, it's worse than that. I'm trans." And he looked like somebody had punched him in the gut. Anyway, I'm skipping ahead from the story about what happened, because this is pivotal. What happened was, me psychologist that I was seeing wasn't specialised in OCD, but he brought across to us pure awe. This, where it's just mainly the rumination, the intrusive side. And he said, if I bring you on to the next level of psychotherapy for this repressed thing, it'll feed the obsession further. So you need to work on your OCD. And that was as we're coming to the end. And he delivered this challenge to us. So rather than accepting that challenge, my brain was, and I can't remember if it was just that or at the very, very same time, and this would have been the back end of 2013, I'd saw a gay man who I knew from my social life who had transitioned, and I was like, what the fuck, what's going on there? And then I found gender dysphoria, and then I went back to the psychologist that week, and I went, forget everything else, right? I am 99% sure all my issues are because of gender dysphoria, and I'm trans. And he was just like, keep in mind, we've just been the week before discussing pure awe and how it manifests.
And you mean pure OCD, which is the thoughts part of OCD. Yeah. Okay, keep going. So you walk in and you say, I have a new theory.
Yeah. And he's like, okay. And I didn't see this to the end, because I was so, at that point, that was a new obsession. And he was just like, you checked out. And he was just like, all right, okay. And because I requested me medical notes, I could see what he actually wrote. And what he wrote it was like, Richard thinks he's transgender this week. And then the following week, it was, this week, Richard is now 100% sure, no, not 99% sure, that he is now trans. But that was as we're coming to the end. And I was like, I'm gonna refer to the gender clinic. I'm going to do this, do that. And I was like, oh, thanks for all your help.
Could I ask you, at that point, could that psychologist have reached you?
No. I think he would, what he should have done, and it wasn't about reaching, it should have been the summarization of that therapy would have been, you're an obsessive individual, right? This needs to be guarded against. This is a new obsession. And it wasn't him. He knew just as well, even then, it was hot water to say who is or isn't trans. But he, in essence, what he did was say, he put it in the notes, and he was just like, this is an obsession. I'm not going to refer him to the next level. And I think the reason he did everything like that is he must have had this reliance as a mental health professional that when I did get picked up by the gender clinic, they would look at that straight away, but they didn't. And it wasn't as if I went in and hid this from them. I told them from the very start that I was really struggling with OCD stuff. They knew from the beginning that was an issue. And everything that I was dealing with them, the OCD was very conditional. That wasn't you can't be trans and have OCD as well. You're allowed to do that. And they were refusing, even entertain that this may be an obsession or anything, until after surgery, when I approached them and I said, I regret this, and they said, you're having an OCD rumination about regret.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
That's what pissed me off the most, because they said, and I've got it in black and white, and I would love to share it. Like, and it was like, I went back. I was seeing a gender therapist. I know I'm skipping ahead all over the story here, but I had like 100 therapies sessions with this gender therapist at the gender clinic. From 2015 to 2020.
Before getting on any hormones or before surgery, or just help us understand the timeline. This is important. So you go from the psychiatrist who's like, this is a rumination, I'm not referring you on. Then clearly you somehow referred yourself to the gender clinic, or just help us get there and then tell us about therapy.
So to refer to the gender clinic, you need to speak to your doctor, and your doctor makes the referral. You can't, that's self-referral. So I rang my doctor, and this was when I was living in my old town, and I give them basically a synopsis of my life. And to be fair, the doctor was like, noted everything down from the homophobic upbringing. I knew now reading back the notes, I knew what she was doing. And she was like, this needs looked at, but she was kind of saying it in a, Richard has experienced this, that, and the other, right? In the hopes that the gender clinic would pick it up. Now, this was at the back end of 2013, and I knew there was a 15-month wait to be seen to be given hormones. Now, one bit of the story I haven't explained is, when I saw that person transition earlier and I went back to the psychologist, it was before then that I found the trans forum. Now, this trans forum, which was run by older males, right? I basically went on, started giving a synopsis of my story, and that, they do that very neutral. You might be, you might not be. And then as I posted a little bit more, what escalated everything, just like it did when I was 12 and 13, was when I shared a picture of myself, and they're like, oh, even cis men are going to desire you, and they were filling me head with all this sort of like, it was the perfect thing to be told for somebody who's dealing with internalized homophobia. You can be a woman loved by men, and that means it means you don't have to be gay, right?
And it kills two birds with one stone, because you get the sexual attraction and connection with men that you desire personally, and you escape the disgust feeling that you hadn't processed, that it's okay to be gay, to be a gay man.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I knew there was a long waiting list. The letter came through saying you're on the waiting thing. So I started ringing the gender clinic. How long is it going to take? How long is it going to take? And I was really on the case. And I was adamant I really wanted to be seen. And I went back to the forum, and I was saying, the one says, boo-hoo, woe me, it's going to take 15, 16 months to get my first appointment. Testosterone is rotting my poor body. Excuse me. And they came at me with the 2013/14 interim gender protocols in the UK, which was a change to the service specification for the NHS, which basically meant that you could have what's called a bridging hormone arrangement. Now, what that meant is you could start hormones before seeing anyone at the gender clinic, in agreement with them, as long as you had a diagnosis of gender dysphoria, at the time it was transsexualism, by a pre-approved GP that was registered on the gender recognition list of GPs or some shit. And they basically pointed this out, and they said, here's what you do, and here's the places you go. And I found a place in Scotland, and on March 18th and March 19th, literally one day after the other, I had 3 appointments. And in those 2 days, it was £500 in a payday loan, because I was earning very, very little as well. And after I give them that 500 quid, I had my full diagnosis of transsexualism, and I told them I couldn't afford private anything. Now, I only did this to start the blocker, because I was obsessed that the blocker was the reason that I was the way I was. Testosterone was the way I was, and being on it would kind of help. And then about 2 weeks after that, they wrote to the gender clinic and me GP and basically said, give him the blocker, blah blah blah. Here's the guidelines, here's the rules in terms of this is why I've got authority to sort of do it. And I started the Goserelin, I always butcher it, I don't know if that's the right way you say it, Zoladex implant, and it goes in the abdomen and it blocks testosterone. Now, this is normally used for cancer patients, prostate patients. Some women sometimes use it as well for some cancers too. And what it basically does is it stops your body or your gonads from secreting testosterone. So it kind of still produces it. It just doesn't know what to do with it, in a sense, rather than before it's like, that needs to go in there and work. But it's like, oh, what do we do with this? So because I was still waiting, I had no hormones in my body for months and months and months and months. And then eventually in September, because I kept going back to them, I was like, is this safe for me to be on nothing? On absolutely nothing? And they're like, yeah, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. And by September, I was like, I know I'm being seen by the gender clinic, but I am a bit worried now that I haven't been on any hormone for like 6-7 months. And yeah, I am blocked, but I'm just wondering, can I have maybe some estrogen or something just for the health? And basically made me case to get the tablet. And they give us a tablet, and they only start you on the lowest dose of these tablets, and they're murder on your liver. And if you don't get the right levels of estrogen, what they do is they just throw more tablets at you until you take like 8 or 10 a day of these estradiol tablets. But for me at the start, it was only 2, and they just never worked. They never registered. And then eventually...
Sorry, when you say they never worked, what do you mean? What do you mean they never worked?
The estrogen, it just... The tablets, the estrogen levels just didn't pick up.
When you were getting your blood tested, the estrogen levels never went up. What were there any experiences you were having when you were blocking your testosterone production? And just... I'm not sure I know.
Crazy,
does it block the production of all kinds of sex hormones or specifically testosterone?
It's an anti-androgen, so I think any androgens, androgen-based hormones, not just testosterone. So I think it has a counter impact where it can increase the production of prolactin. Or is that with the estrogen? Sorry, I don't want to say any bad science here.
Okay, did you feel anything?
Initially, when I had the blocker, I had a surge of testosterone because that's what happens to people. And I felt immensely confident, and I looked like a crazy person, honestly. I had very short hair. I was still quite big, and I was, you know how it is when you're a new transitioner, you don't really know how to dress yourself or whatever. And I'm thinking I looked fine. I did not look okay. And I just must have looked like an absolute Fruit Loop crazy person. People were like avoiding us and everything because I just must have looked mental.
And you said you felt great. You felt a surge of testosterone. It's almost a survival kind of instinct from the body. Is that right? When it gets blocked? Yeah.
Yeah. And also I'm sharing pictures online, but of course it's not, and I'm not sharing pictures like I'm standing now. It's like you take the perfect selfie from the right angle. I didn't mess around with filters, but I was all about the angle. So I've got all these pictures of us from me transition from, and I'm like this, you know what I mean? And it's like, it's hard to even gauge what you even look like. So for the first few months, especially, I was really distorting how I actually looked. And I was making sure that I was only going into spaces that were kind of, I knew that when I posted the picture, I was going to get the right positivity back. And I wouldn't do it in any uncontrolled space where I might get any criticism because my ego is so fragile.
We hope you're enjoying this episode of our podcast. We work very hard to maintain high-quality content for this show, and we're grateful to Rhyme and GenSpect for supporting us.
RIME, or Rethink Identity Medicine Ethics, is a non-profit organisation dedicated to improving long-term care for gender-variant individuals. Visit rethinkime.org to learn more.
And GenSpect is an international alliance of parents and professional groups whose aim is to advocate for parents of gender-questioning children and young people.
If you'd like to become a patron, you'll have access to weekly transcripts and special Q&As, and you can join our listener community.
Now back to the show. And was this mostly online, or were you also like, I'm going to go into a restaurant or a store with my awesome new trans look? This was purely an online experiment.
This was all online. I was terrified of going outside. I literally went to work and that was it. And
it's so important to just kind of keep this juxtaposition in mind, because you're going to doctors in real life who are tinkering with your real life hormones so that you can sit behind your computer screen and post photos. And I'm not saying that to be critical. What I'm saying is this is such a tempting pull that a lot of young people experience, and you have this. It's like you have two separate lives, but they're all for the purpose of your online life.
For your character that you create, because that's what I did.
Okay.
My character looks a certain way, sounds a certain way, likes certain interests, and that's what I realized it was for me. It was a character, and a character of what I think I should have been, rather than who I was and who I was bursting out to be all the time, you know?
And you spoke about, you're the psychiatrist guy almost affectionately, and the doctor who you went to. Who would you say didn't treat you well, if you follow me, professionally?
The gender clinic as a whole, the psychiatrist that I paid for, who
basically you bought the diagnosis off him, really.
And there's a funny one to that, because. So just to continue on the timeline, I eventually got seen by a psychiatrist at the gender clinic in February 2015. That's when I officially got enrolled. And the first thing she asked me was, do you want genital reassignment surgery? And I was like, ooh, I've never really thought about that. Can I have some therapy to work it out? Which, to be honest, should have been enough for I'll be like, I guess not then. And so then a month later, I enrolled with a therapist at the gender clinic. They were what's called a psychosexual therapist. And I started them with March 2015. And, I've still got all the enrollment letters and what we're supposed to cover. It's dead funny. The enrollment letter to therapy is drastically different to the discharge letter. It's like where we started and where we wanted to go to where we ended up is extraordinarily interesting. Anyway, so I was still in quite a vulnerable state, and by July 2015, I went back to the psychiatrist. It was 5 months later, and she was like, do you want genital surgery? And I was like, possibly, I think so, but I'm a bit worried about, I'm worried about blood. I'm worried about regretting it. I said this to her. I'm worried about complications. So she was like, you've had a lot of misinformation, right? And I was like, what you need to do is you need to go for a second opinion. Don't worry, this time we'll pay for it back in Scotland, right? And I can't for the life of us. Oh yeah, I remember me. It's because to get a second opinion for this, it was either them or I had to go down to London for it or something. And they were like, well, that's closer, so we'll do that one and we'll pay for it. So I brought my mother to that one, right? And my mother's like, she had a word in private with the person when I went up, and she was like, he's fucking insane, right? And he's like no, she didn't say it like that, right? She was like, she said, he's highly depressed. He's on a high dose of SSRIs, like I'm on 200 milligrams of sertraline, right? I'm not on a small dose. Been on this dose for a long time because I had very intense panic attacks and stuff. And she was like, he's highly diagnosed. I don't know if he's autistic or not. And you're just kind of throwing this at him. Do you not think this is a bit dangerous? And she just demolished me mother, like ripped her to shreds, to the point where she never wanted to question it ever again, because she was just like, she got made to feel like an absolute bastard. And I kind of, in my heart, knew that's why I wanted to bring her there, to because I wanted the specialist to tell her that this was real. But it was only my mother from the start who was actually advocating for us. And honestly, if I was like 10 years younger, not saying that I would go when I was going through it when I was 15, but if I was born in 97 and not 87, my mother would have been an ROGD mother, without a shadow of a doubt. She would have been in those groups. She would have been like, she would have been like, this just came out of fucking nowhere. I've got this gifted kid who's very naive and can argue his way out of a paper bag, but he's a little bit too, like, he's captured. He's caught by this idea. And then me referral for surgery came through later in 2015, and I was like, too fast, don't want to do this, reject it. So they went, okay. And then asked us in 2016, would you like to have surgery? And I was like, nah, I still want some time to work this out in the therapy. So I continued the therapy. And then in 2016, I was taking all sorts of drugs. I was having random sex encounters, which were arranged by other trans people with older men as well. I just kind of repeated what I was doing. And they... what was it? They'd contacted the crisis team a few times in 2016 as well, because I was just off the rails, like, and I went down to 11 stone, which for my height was really, I was just like totally keen in it. And then in early 2017, I had another few of these instances where they were like, ringing the crisis team, whatever. I wasn't suicidal because I hated my body. I was just suicidal because I was like in deep distress, right? And I had no idea why. And I'm like breaking down all the time in work and stuff. And I had a period where I had to have some time off because I was just so messed up. And then keep in mind, in March 2017, my therapist actually raised the alarm with the crisis team. And then a month later, I'm back at the psychiatrist, and she's like, okay, you're established on your hormones. You've said no to surgery a few times. If you don't want surgery, which is what we're here for, we're a service, then we'll discharge you. But I'm getting therapy, and I'm like, well, I need the therapy, and she was like, naturally, but if you want surgery again, then you can just refer. But it was like, by that point in 2017, the waiting list for the gender clinic was 4 years. And I was like, shit, I'm not. What happens if I change my mind? What happens if I actually do find I want the surgery and all this sort of thing?
You kind of felt like the train was leaving the station. And
yeah. So
yeah,
she confronted us, and I was like, you know what? Okay, I don't want it then. And I ended that therapy. I ended that psychiatric session, and I knew I was going to get discharged. So literally, I don't know, I can't remember the conversation, but I went back to the therapist a few days later. Don't know what the hell we discussed in there. Can't remember, but it ended in me calling my psychiatrist back to refer us back to surgery. But like, the therapist just lit a fire in my ass. It was like, yeah, you're experiencing atrophy. You had all these gay experiences with older men, and you don't like the gay experience, clearly. You've got all this internalized, like, homophobia and all this sort of thing. And it's clear that, like, eventually you're going to need it. And what happens if this, And so I got referred, and I really believed I needed that. I really believed I needed it. And then 2018 came. I had the surgery, and within, I had a hard recovery, and in 3 months, I think it was, after the surgery, I started back at the therapy with the gender clinic, the therapist. And I said, dude, I think I regret this. I think this is a really fucking bad idea. And then he laid on you've just had general anesthetic, that lowers serotonin levels, therefore this is an OCD rumination. So I came back to him the next week and the next week and the next week saying the same thing. And then about 6 months later said, it's clear your OCD is pretty bad, so we're going to refer you for OCD therapy. Then I got discharged in 2020, and that's why I'm suing them, you know?
Oh my God.
Jesus, Richie.
That's the quick version.
It's just, it does look like medical negligence. It's just awful what they did.
So for you, the regret happened very soon after surgery.
Oh yeah, very quickly. There wasn't, I have done the right thing. There was initial in hospital. So just to explain something, all the fears that I worried about initially in 2015 came true. I had extreme hemorrhaging in surgery. They recorded 1,600 milliliters of blood loss, right? And you've got 4,000 milliliters of blood in your body. So I'd lost, it was about 35% of my total blood. And then I was still bleeding after surgery. And they waited a couple of days to give us a blood transfusion. And it was a nurse who really was like, you need to give them a blood transfusion because they look fucked. And there was this, I don't think I've got it anymore, but I took a photo of the time and it literally looked like somebody'd got a syringe and just sucked all the life out of us. And I was like, like skeletal. And so I was extremely delirious from that, from the pain medication, and I couldn't remember much for the first few days. And when I did eventually get the blood transfusion and the pain med started to wear off, and I was kind of coming down a bit. And then it was when I really started to like look at myself in the mirror, and I just looked like I'd been savaged it looked like I'd been attacked. There wasn't anything wonderful about it. It literally looked like an animal had got on my crotch and it just went to town on it. And I was just like, what the fuck have I done? And what I also think, I can't prove it, but I feel like that anti-androgen was a big part in like inducing like the psychotic state that I was in the years before, where I had all my other trauma as well, and this anti-androgen sent me fucking wild. And to me it seems very, just almost too perfect how a few weeks after surgery, where you no longer need it and it's wearing off, that you start waking up and you're like, whoa, what the fuck? It's like, this isn't a fantasy. This isn't a character. This isn't this whole role play that you're embedded in, that you think is you. No, it's not. It's not. And then you're like, wow, what have I given up? What have I actually done? And then the shame starts, and then the regret kicks in. And then for me, what I did after 2019, 2020, I just poured myself into work. I just went work, and did nothing but work, and was deeply focused in it, and would distract myself to no end. And then I got to a point where I kind of achieved what I wanted to, and I'm reading all these messages in the background, and then I can't encapsulate my detransition because it wasn't just because of what I went through with the gender clinic. It was what I was going through with the trans community, online, offline. It was what was happening under my name as a trans person. It was all the discourse that in 2014-15, I was very confident to defend it. And then after my experience and then seeing what was going on, I was finding it extremely difficult to defend it. And it was when I started looking at the surgery regret stuff, it was banned on Reddit. All the groups and websites were getting taken down as hate. And the only place I could find any discussion on this was a website which is now being taken down. It's not a good, like, by any means, it's not like a bastion of free speech. They do they are very, very, it is a free speech platform, but that comes with all manner of free speech, and it is nasty, but it is, you can find whatever there. And then I saw all these surgery things, and I was going back to Reddit, and I saw that everything was being kind of blocked, or you would get talked down, or you would get, oh, poor you, but that's not the normal experience. Be careful, transphobes are using it against you, sort of, to weaponize other people, sort of thing. And then I found the detrans community, which is a story in itself. And then
what's that story?
Oh God, I don't think we've got the time, but basically in 2021, someone, a gay guy at work, it's dead funny, a gay guy brought us in and a gay guy brought us out. All the gay guy at work was just, he posted this Day of Detrans thing, right? And at the time I was like, what the fuck is this, right? And I was really angry because I'm dealing with my own regret, and I was like, this is some sort of troll, this is some anti-trans thing, and I was very much in that mindset still. And then a few months go by, and in the background I'm still looking at like the negative results. So I'm literally in two mindsets, and I know I'm dealing with me initial response to it, which is, this is anti-trans, this is bad, and the other side, which is desperate for a conversation, desperate to find out there's others like me. And then about 3 or 4 months went by, and then I found the detrans community late at 2021. And then I finally joined the detrans Discord at the end of 2021. And then I started speaking to other detrans. I wasn't considering myself a detransitioner at that point. And I spoke to a detrans guy who is about 12 years older than me. There was plenty my age though, but he nicest dude in the world. And it was one phrase he said, and it unlocked me, like, completely. It unlocked me, like, in terms of I wasn't alone. And what he said was, I woke up one day and I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I can't, whatever this is, I can't do it. And I was like, oh, that is exactly how I feel. I was like, I'm waking up, I'm putting on my voice, a walk. I've got all these different beliefs. I'm restraining my nature, which is quite, I'm quite explosive, and I fill out the room sort of thing, you know what I mean? And I just found myself becoming less and less me and more a stranger in my own life and body, and I didn't like it, and it wasn't worth it. And these promises of false utopia of like, this is what you do to get happy no matter what, and it's even a bad result is better than what you had before, even though I really didn't want it in that. And then I'm dealing with all these other issues like addiction and everything else, and I was just like, fuck this, fuck it. And I'm sorry for swearing. And I was just like, I can't do it. What's the worst that's going to happen if I let the devil in, sort of thing. So I not shaved my head, got a haircut, got some new clothes, and just tried going back to my old name. And I found, oh, holy shit, I actually like this. I prefer this. Why didn't I try this before? But that is the short version of that.
How long of a process was that from like finding that guy's statement to you cutting the hair, going back to your name? A year. I mean, it's important to put that in context, right? Because anybody who's listening, whether you're a dysphoric person or you're the parent of a kid, we hear these stories and people move through the timeline, but this is a long, excruciating process of self-reflection and like waking up and like what's going on, and probably oscillation, like good moments, bad moments.
Yeah.
Okay, so I wish we had infinitely more time with you, Richie, but I don't want to neglect the work you're doing around male detransitioners specifically. And you've talked a lot about the position that you guys are in. You're so right. Whenever we hear mainstream media starting to cover detransition, we hear about the girl stories, we hear about the internalized misogyny, we hear about these things, and the guys get pushed to the side. What do you want people to understand about this experience for males?
That any human can be victimized by the belief that all your problems are actually external. That is such a tempting construct. And just because yes, there are other mechanisms at play, but it's a different route way for males, and they are just as equally important in this, and they get treated as low value, or they get treated as the cause. And to be honest, there are sects of people who will view any male as a highly, highly negative factor in the trans, no matter where you come from in the trans discourse. So whether or not you're a detransitioner or not, you're still a male, and you've still contributed somehow to this thing. Whereas a female detransitioner doesn't get that baggage, and it's like a sort of an allegiance to the sex that males are the baddies, females are the goodies, and with that, you cannot be a victim because you are the oppressor. But you have many, mainly autistic, ASD, OCD, gay, bi, and straight young guys who have got their own issues, trauma, who are vulnerable. And people need to understand something about vulnerability. It doesn't have an age limit. It doesn't turn off when you turn 18 or 25. It doesn't go, ho, you're 25 or 26 now. You're fine. You're good. You're good. Why would somebody at the age of 17 and 11 months and 3 weeks old have less authority than somebody who was 2 weeks older than that kid? What's the difference? Really, what is the difference? You can put an age marker on certain things in life, like lottery, alcohol, for a reason, right? Because you may not be able a child, for instance, is going to be vulnerable to gambling addiction because it's a very instant win. And then also there are financial issues with that too. Alcohol is a very adverse effect on the body. That's got an age limit. I don't agree with people being able to join the army from a very young age, but there's a reason they do, so they can be shaped and formed, and the adults of the army's choosing and stuff. But this is just something else, and we're happily abandon the adults. Like it's an okay to do that. It's okay they made their choice. We've lost all hope for them. Let's focus on the kids. And I'm like, no, you need to focus on the adults, because when you focus on the adults, you inherently will capture the kids too. If you just focus on the kids, you will only stop that happening from them, and you've still got all this huge swathe of people who are desperate and crying out for help, who want the help, who want to detransition. They want the services to do that, but they get told that the only sympathy available is for children or women. Why would you? Like, what's appealing about that? You can come out and get screamed at by all sides, get screamed at and answer to things that you've never even done, answer to crimes for other people and stuff. And it's like, why would you come out as a detrans male? Why would you? The platform is very, very hostile, which is why I do what I do. Everything I tweet, everything I say, it's not all like sat and thought out, but most of it is like, I need to show people what conversation is, how this conversation is going, whether it's from a trans activist who has been extremely unkind to either a detransitioner, whether it's me or another one, or a radical extremist who, whatever persuasion they come from, who's doing the same. And just like, I want to point it out, and I'm not here to fix it. That's for other people to fix it. I've had enough,
Yeah, you talked, and I've heard other male detransitioners also talk about this idea of toxic testosterone making me this horrible man. And it's interesting because there is some of that rhetoric in the farthest extremes of certain radical feminist philosophy too. So ironically, the same beliefs that perhaps led you into transitioning, getting rid of your male characteristics, are also used sometimes against guys who are trying to work these issues out. And you even said in one of your pieces, it's not the nice, sensitive people who are like doing like that need these messages. It's the aggressive people. And frankly, like you're one of the sensitive people. That's why you were paranoid about your masculinity in the first place.
Yeah. Sorry, I've got nothing. So that was a good summary. So
I wanted to ask, did you pass well as, I know at the beginning you said you didn't. Did you pass well as a trans woman for those times?
oh
You
yeah,
did?
yeah.
Yeah.
Blended in absolutely fine. Yeah.
And you said you kind of had passing sex with people, and was it okay? Could you have been happy as a trans person? Do you
But
think?
wasn't that before surgery,
okay?
the random sex?
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I probably could have been, I think. I think I naturally would have, if I didn't go through surgery, because what I said before surgery, I was worried about detransitioning, ironically, to the therapist. And obviously they were like, stay on course. And I was just like, I don't know, I found it very, sorry, I've lost my train of thought on that one.
I was thinking, you said something about atrophy, and I didn't know that there was atrophy among males.
Oh, God. Yeah, well, what happens is everything shrinks, and you lose with that shrinkage, you lose a lot of functionality, you lose what people need to understand is the penis itself is behind the foreskin is like there's like a natural little bit of lubricant there to move the foreskin up and down. And with everything going smaller, that kind of doesn't happen as much, so it gets a lot drier down there. And also, your skin doesn't shrink too, so the bit itself is smaller. You've got problems with testicles. Some people have issues and it's normally from tucking, where they can get like testicles stuck up there and all sorts of nasty stuff. It's like,
where I'm going is that it's nearly like you were being pushed. Once you're taking estrogen, once the testosterone has been blocked, it feels like it's almost pushing people towards surgery because of the complications that the estrogen and the blocking of the testosterone creates. Yeah, kind of that's what happened to you, as far as I could see. Not only were the therapists, but the hormones were pushing it.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many other factors at play, I think if anyone turns down any major surgery like this, that should be enough to raise a red flag, not just once, but like 3 or 4 times. And it's like people think, well, why did you say yes? And I'm like, you don't understand. They just don't understand the power of hormones, the power of medical professionals telling you this is the right answer, the power of the community, the power of being entrenched to believe that you're fighting a moral cause too. Like, there are so many powerful motivating factors. And what vulnerable people need, regardless of how old they are, is they need these measures in place to be like, I think you should sort XYZ out before you even go down this route. There's no way I'm doing it.
And even the question, why would you do it? It almost assumes that you were just like out there floating around by yourself in the world and just like putting stuff in your Amazon shopping cart or something. You visited a series of professionals and said no multiple times and were pushed over and over and over down the line. So that is incredibly powerful, and you were doing what you should have done, which is you were seeking help, and really you never got it.
Mm-hmm. But it's still my fault because I still did it, and that's why detransitioners get caught up, because they think, well, I did it at the end of the day. It doesn't matter what anyone else said. It has to be my fault, because we love to blame ourselves. We absolutely love to self-blame, and we punish ourselves. And my message is, yes, I'm not absolving myself 100% responsibility, but I could have easily been caught not just once, but plenty of times. There was more than enough times for them to say, we are going to put the brakes on this, and here's why. And there wasn't even that discussion. There wasn't even the question brought to us. Anything to do with doubt or regret came from me. And it was just like, I don't know, it looking back on it, when I say it, and I know it happened to me, it feels like it happened to someone else. It feels bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
But if anyone's thinking, why did your lawyer take this on pro bono? This is why. Because it's absolutely obscene. And to think that this is happening to more than just me. It's not just me, you know?
And what would you say to anybody who's listening, who's anywhere on your journey as such, from being younger or older?
Avoid surgeons at all costs. And I'm not kidding you that. Like, no matter how bad you think it is down there, there's like, I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that. It's very tough because in nature, I do have a lot of libertarian values, and I don't want to restrict anyone from doing something, but I don't want to enable people to hurt themselves. Like, in the same way, I wouldn't let an anorexic have a gastric bypass. Bypass. I don't think it's appropriate for most people to have genital surgery. The vast majority should not be having it. The vast majority should have had an investment in ensuring that any neurodivergence was getting taken care of, and supported, and also any sort of comorbidities were taken care of before not only going down this extremely risky and dangerous procedure, but expensive too. Right? It's expensive for the health service to do this. It's like 20 grand a pop. And then you add in all the hospital stuff, the aftercare, the tests, everything, it's not cheap. Surely commissioning a psychotherapist for a year is cheaper than that. And it's like, why? What's the problem? It's like, oh, it's safeguards and all that sort of thing. And I'm like, yeah, we need them. There's a reason why doctors don't cut off people's arms for the crack,
Do you think if you hadn't had surgery, you would have just kept on living as a...
I would have desisted.
You would have. What do you think would have been the trigger point in that case?
Not having surgery. I think I was like, well, if I'm going to continue down this path...
That really symbolized a final place in the trans process for you, was the surgery. Yeah. I see.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, keep going.
Yeah. So some people seem to respond to surgery. It seems these hormones are so gradual. They come in, gradually, and the changes happen gradually. And I've just heard so many stories from detransitioners, the brick wall of surgery brought them into detransition, if you follow me. It was just a slamming face against brick reality.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah, that I sometimes think it'll be only surgery that will bring that person out, if you follow me. And I know that's not anybody wants to hear that, but it passes through my mind as a concept that there's something about the brutality of it that so many detransitioners just think, oh my God, I got the surgery, and then I saw what was going on.
That is interesting, because the people in the detrans males group who didn't get surgery, they started waking up when they started seeing the bad surgical results, when they started getting, because they were like me, they weren't keen to look at this before surgery at all, because they were getting sold this idea until somebody said, you need to check this thread out on this site, or you need to check this out, or this report. And then they look at it and they're like, what on earth? No one told me that's what happens. No one told me you deal with that. No one told me, there was not any conversation about internal hair growth. There was no conversation about the fact that you're going to be in absolute numbness on the outside. You're going to be completely numb, and that's normal. There's a high chance that you're never going to orgasm ever again. There's a high chance that you're going to lose all sensation internally. There's a high chance you're going to get urinary issues. You're going to get infections. And like you don't quite understand any of these things when you're addicted to drugs and you are not in a good place and you are borderline I felt psychotic. That's the only way I can describe it. And it's just like at the end of it, when you regret it, a lot of people, I think, just take their own lives, and then those deaths get martyred as trans deaths, and the circle jerk continues because people are so ashamed of speaking out about it, about the regret. People will not. That's why people will take their own lives, especially because the shame is so overpowering. But if you can dispel that shame and say, actually, yeah, you might have a little bit of responsibility, but it's not all on you. There are other people at play here. And the second that you give males that permission, they will take it, because we are a permission-seeking bunch.
Wow, Richie, I don't think there's a better place we could end it than there. We're very grateful for your story and for sharing your experience with us. And we think that the work you're doing and your Substack and everything that you've been able to illuminate for us is helping way more people than we realize. And we're very grateful.
No, thank you. That's very kind.
It's true.
Thanks, Richie.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us this week on Gender, A Wider Lens. This podcast is sponsored by Rhyme and GenSpect, and listener support means a lot to us. The best way to help is to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
Follow us on social media, and if you'd like to become a patron, you'll have access to weekly transcripts of the show, special Q&As, and you can join our listener community. Just go to our Linktree. That's linktr.ee/widerlenspod.
Our discussions are for educational purposes only and are not intended as a substitute for mental health services.